Mikhail Kalashnikov's origin story. Soviet tank sergeant Mikhail Kalashnikov began designing rifles while recovering from wounds sustained during World War II, driven by frustration that Soviet infantry lacked a reliable automatic weapon to match German assault rifles encountered on the battlefield. He developed his design through a series of prototypes during the mid-1940s, drawing on lessons from captured German rifles and earlier Soviet weapons testing programs. His final design, designated the Avtomat Kalashnikova, emerged from state-sponsored competitive trials where multiple Soviet engineers submitted rival rifle designs for military evaluation. It fired the newly developed 7.62 by 39 mm intermediate cartridge, weighed about 4.3 kilograms loaded, and fed from a 30-round curved magazine, combining features Kalashnikov considered essential for reliability under harsh field conditions. Its design prioritized simplicity and generous internal clearances between moving parts, allowing the mechanism to function reliably even when clogged with mud, sand, or snow that would jam more precisely fitted rifles. Soviet military testing praised its exceptional reliability compared to competing designs, even though its accuracy and craftsmanship lagged behind more refined Western rifles of the era. Kalashnikov's background as a tank crewman rather than a trained engineer shaped his practical, soldier-focused approach to the design, prioritizing what worked reliably over elegant or sophisticated engineering. His rifle's eventual global significance would have seemed almost unimaginable to Kalashnikov himself during those early post-war development years. Few weapons designers in history have seen their creation reach the scale of influence Kalashnikov's rifle eventually achieved worldwide. Official Soviet adoption. The Soviet Army officially adopted Kalashnikov's rifle in 1949, designating it the AK-47 and beginning full-scale production at state arsenals across the Soviet Union. Its adoption came after several years of additional testing and refinement following the initial prototype trials, ensuring the design met rigorous Soviet military reliability standards before widespread issue. Soviet military planners specifically valued the rifle's simplicity, recognizing that a weapon requiring minimal training and maintenance suited a large conscript army drawing from soldiers with varying levels of technical education. Its stamped and machined steel construction, while more resource-intensive than later stamped-only production methods, still proved dramatically cheaper and faster to manufacture than many contemporary Western rifle designs. Soviet military doctrine during this period emphasized overwhelming numbers and mechanized warfare, and a reliable, mass-producible automatic rifle fit perfectly within this broader strategic philosophy. The rifle's official adoption meant Soviet factories needed to scale production dramatically, ultimately manufacturing millions of units over the following decades to equip the enormous Soviet military and its expanding network of allied states. This initial adoption decision set in motion a manufacturing and distribution network that would eventually place the rifle in the hands of soldiers, insurgents, and civilians across every inhabited continent. Soviet officials at the time likely understood the rifle's military value, but could not have fully anticipated its eventual role as a global symbol of Soviet military influence. Its formal 1949 adoption represents the true starting point of what would become the most consequential firearm distribution story in modern history. Following Soviet adoption, the newly formed Warsaw Pact alliance began standardizing member nations' military rifles around the AK-47 platform throughout the 1950s, extending Soviet manufacturing licenses to allied Eastern European states. Countries including East Germany, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and Czechoslovakia began domestic production under various licensing arrangements starting through the mid and late 1950s. Each nation's arsenals often introduced small manufacturing variations while maintaining full compatibility with Soviet ammunition and magazines, reflecting the alliance's broader push towards standardized logistics across member militaries. This licensed production dramatically multiplied global manufacturing capacity beyond what Soviet factories alone could produce, embedding the rifle's design into the industrial base of an entire geopolitical bloc, rather than a single nation. China also received Soviet technical assistance and manufacturing licenses during this period, beginning its own massive Type 56 production that would eventually rival Soviet output in total volume. This coordinated licensing strategy meant the rifle's design, rather than remaining a closely guarded Soviet secret, spread rapidly across the entire communist world through official government channels. Soviet leadership viewed this widespread standardization as strengthening alliance cohesion, ensuring Allied militaries could share ammunition, parts, and training standards during any potential joint military action against NATO forces. This deliberate multiplication of manufacturing sources meant that even if Soviet production somehow stopped, the rifle's design would continue proliferating through numerous independent national arsenals. This licensing strategy proved enormously consequential decades later, since it meant no single nation ultimately controlled or could restrict the rifle's continued global spread. Soviet and Chinese manufactured AK-47 rifles flowed into North Vietnam and Allied Viet Cong forces throughout the Vietnam War, becoming the defining weapon of communist forces fighting against American and South Vietnamese troops from the early 1960s onward. Its reliability in the harsh, wet jungle conditions of Southeast Asia proved genuinely superior to the early, troubled M16 rifles American forces initially carried, a contrast that became a significant point of comparison throughout the conflict. Vietnamese forces used it extensively in guerrilla warfare tactics, valuing its ability to function reliably after being submerged in rice paddies, buried for concealment, or otherwise treated roughly under field conditions impossible to avoid during prolonged jungle combat. American soldiers who captured AK-47 rifles from enemy forces often expressed genuine admiration for the weapon's rugged reliability, sometimes even preferring captured rifles over their own issued weapons during the war's early years. This period cemented the rifle's battlefield reputation on a global stage, since Vietnam represented one of the first major conflicts where the world's media extensively documented the weapon in active combat use. Soviet and Chinese support for North Vietnam demonstrated how effectively the rifle's widespread availability could support extended guerrilla campaigns against numerically and technologically superior conventional forces. Its performance throughout the war significantly boosted global demand and reputation, encouraging further Soviet and Chinese arms exports to other Allied movements and governments during the following decades. Vietnam effectively served as the rifle's global proving ground, establishing a reputation for battlefield reliability that would follow it into countless subsequent conflicts. Throughout the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, the Soviet Union and its allies supplied enormous quantities of AK-47 rifles to liberation movements and newly independent governments across Africa, supporting numerous anti-colonial and Cold War proxy conflicts. Countries including Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and numerous others received Soviet and Chinese-supplied rifles as part of broader ideological and strategic support for movements aligned against Western-backed colonial or client governments. Its low cost and minimal training requirements made it especially practical for arming large numbers of irregular fighters who often lacked formal military training or education, a genuine tactical advantage for guerrilla and liberation movements. Soviet arms exports during this period often came bundled with broader military and economic support packages, using rifle shipments as one component of larger geopolitical alliance-building efforts across the developing world. Its widespread distribution throughout African conflicts meant the rifle became closely associated with liberation movements, some of which later became recognized independent governments once their conflicts concluded. Several African nations even incorporated the rifle's distinctive silhouette into national flags and emblems following independence, reflecting its symbolic association with liberation struggles across the continent. This extensive African distribution network meant that decades after the original Cold War conflicts ended, enormous quantities of AK-47 rifles remained in circulation, continuing to arm subsequent conflicts across the same regions. The rifle's African legacy illustrates how Cold War-era arms distribution created lasting effects that outlasted the original ideological conflicts that drove the initial weapons shipments. Its continued presence across African conflict zones decades later demonstrates just how durable and long-lasting these Cold War-era distribution networks ultimately proved. Soviet and Allied nations supplied AK-47 rifles extensively to Arab states and various movements throughout Middle Eastern conflicts from the 1950s onward, including the Arab-Israeli Wars and numerous subsequent regional conflicts throughout the following decades. Egypt, Syria, and other Soviet-aligned Arab states received substantial rifle shipments as part of broader Cold War military support arrangements, competing against American assistance to Israel and other regional allies. Its widespread distribution throughout the region meant it became the standard rifle for numerous national armies, insurgent movements, and non-state actors across the Middle East over subsequent decades. Various regional conflicts, including Lebanon's civil war and later conflicts throughout the region, saw extensive AK-47 use by government forces and irregular militias alike, reflecting the rifle's near-universal availability throughout the area. Its reliability under harsh desert conditions, similar to its jungle performance in Vietnam, made it genuinely well-suited to the varied combat environments found throughout Middle Eastern conflict zones. Regional arms markets, both legal and illicit, ensured continued circulation of AK-pattern rifles throughout subsequent decades, even as original Cold War-era stockpiles gradually depleted or degraded. Its adoption by such a wide range of state militaries, militias, and non-state actors throughout the region reflects the rifle's fundamental accessibility compared to more expensive, complex Western alternatives. The Middle East's continued instability throughout subsequent decades kept demand for AK-pattern rifles consistently high, sustaining both legal military sales and extensive illicit arms trafficking networks. Its presence throughout the region remains a persistent feature of Middle Eastern conflicts well into the present day. By the 1980s and 1990s, the sheer scale of global AK-pattern rifle production, spanning Soviet, Chinese, and numerous licensed manufacturers, had created an unprecedented worldwide surplus, reaching insurgent and criminal networks far beyond original government-controlled distribution channels. Estimates suggest well over 75 million AK-pattern rifles have been produced across all variants and manufacturers combined, making it by far the most widely produced firearm platform in human history. Its low manufacturing cost, often under $100 per unit in bulk production, meant it remained affordable even for poorly funded insurgent movements, criminal organizations, and non-state militias lacking formal government backing. Conflicts across Central America, the Balkans, and various post-Soviet states throughout the 1990s saw extensive AK-pattern rifle use, reflecting how thoroughly the weapon had saturated global arms markets following the Cold War's conclusion. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 released enormous quantities of surplus rifles from former Soviet and Warsaw Pact military stockpiles into international arms markets, both legal and illicit, further accelerating global proliferation. Its widespread availability made it the weapon of choice for child soldiers in numerous African conflicts throughout this period, a deeply troubling aspect of the rifle's global legacy that human rights organizations have extensively documented. This period cemented the rifle's reputation as history's most successful and most consequential mass-produced weapon, reaching virtually every active conflict zone on Earth in some capacity. Its sheer ubiquity by this point meant controlling or tracking its global distribution had become essentially impossible for any single government or international body. The rifle had effectively become a permanent, uncontrollable feature of global conflict, rather than a weapon tied to any single nation or era. Soviet engineers introduced the improved AKM variant in 1959, refining the original AK-47's manufacturing process by switching from machined to stamped steel receivers, dramatically reducing production time and cost, while maintaining the platform's core reliability. This manufacturing shift allowed even faster mass production across Soviet and licensed foreign factories, further accelerating the rifle's already rapid global proliferation throughout the 1960s and beyond. The Soviet Union later introduced the AK-74 in 1974, chambering the smaller, faster 5.45 by 39 mm cartridge to match emerging Western trends toward lighter intermediate cartridges following NATO's adoption of 5.56 mm ammunition. Its lighter cartridge allowed soldiers to carry significantly more ammunition for the same overall weight, while also reducing recoil and improving controllability during automatic fire compared to the original 7.62 mm chambering. Soviet forces began fielding the AK-74 extensively during the Soviet-Afghan War beginning in 1979, where its performance in mountainous, dusty conditions further reinforced the platform's reputation for battlefield reliability. Various former Soviet states and allied nations gradually adopted the AK-74 pattern following the original AK-47 and AKM's decades of prior service, continuing the platform's evolutionary development rather than replacing it with an entirely different rifle design. This continuous evolutionary approach, refining rather than replacing the core platform, allowed manufacturing infrastructure and soldier familiarity to carry forward across each successive generation. Each iteration maintained the fundamental design philosophy Kalashnikov established decades earlier, prioritizing reliability and simplicity over refined accuracy or advanced features. This evolutionary continuity, across more than 7 decades, represents one of the most successful examples of sustained weapons platform development in modern military history. Today, AK pattern rifles remain in active service with dozens of national militaries, countless insurgent and paramilitary groups, and civilian owners across virtually every country in the world with functioning small arms markets. Its silhouette appears on national flags, including Mozambique's, and countless political and military emblems worldwide, reflecting its unmatched status as a global symbol of both liberation movements and armed conflict depending on context. Manufacturing continues today across Russia, numerous former Soviet states, China, and various licensed and unlicensed producers worldwide, ensuring the platform's continued availability decades after its original 1947 design. Its reputation for reliability under harsh conditions, established through Vietnam, African liberation wars, and countless subsequent conflicts, remains its defining characteristic, even as more technologically advanced rifles have emerged from Western manufacturers. Civilian ownership of semi-automatic AK pattern rifles has grown substantially in numerous countries, including the United States, reflecting continued demand for the platform's proven reliability even outside military and conflict contexts. Its total production numbers, dwarfing every other firearm platform in history, mean AK pattern rifles will likely remain in circulation and active use for many more decades to come, regardless of whether production ever fully ceases. Kalashnikov himself, before his death in 2013, expressed complicated feelings about his rifle's legacy, acknowledging both its role in legitimate national defense and its devastating presence in conflicts and violence worldwide. Few inventions of the 20th century have shaped global conflict as profoundly and continuously as Kalashnikov's original design has, over more than 7 decades. Its journey from a wounded soldier's post-war prototype to the most produced and widely distributed firearm in human history remains one of the most consequential stories in modern military technology. If you found this breakdown useful, share this video with someone who's into military history or firearms design. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. Let us know in the comments which topic you want covered next.